Ever get that feeling where a word looks right on paper, but it sounds totally off when you say it out loud? Or like vice versa?
It happens to the best of us.
Oh, yeah. English is full of these tricky word pairs, the kind that make you second guess yourself, even if you've been writing for years.
Absolutely. And it's funny, we're actually diving into some of the most common culprits today. And get this, the examples are pulled from a podcast script on confusing English words for beginners.
No way. Really? You're kidding. For beginners.
Not kidding. But trust me, even if it's meant for beginners, there are some real gems in here, things that'll make even the most experienced English speaker go, oh, that's what the difference is. Like, seriously, I had a few of those moments prepping for this.
Okay, well, I'm intrigued. I got to hear these beginner-level mind blowers. What's first?
Well, I kick things off with words that sound the same. Homophones.
Right, words that sound alike but have totally different meanings and spellings. Okay, so like the classic triplets, right? There, and two, and of course, your and your. I swear those trip up everyone, no matter how long they've been speaking English.
It's almost like our brains just go on autopilot when we hear these words, especially in casual conversation, you know what I mean?
Yeah, totally.
But think about it. How often do you actually see these words written down as opposed to how often you hear them?
Right, yeah. It's way more often hearing them.
Exactly. It's no wonder we mix them up.
So what's the secret? How do we avoid these homophone traps?
The key is to slow down for a second and think about the function of the word in that sentence. Like, is it about possession, like, there? Or is it location, like there? Or is it like a contraction, like there?
That's a really good point. I know I'm guilty of kind of like skimming over those little words when I'm reading and just relying on context to figure out the meaning, which I guess explains why I mess them up in my own writing sometimes.
It happens. But speaking of words that can be tricky, let's move on to the next category in our beginner's guide here. They call this section words that look similar.
Ooh, okay. This is where things get really interesting, I think, because a lot of times those words have completely different meanings, even though they look almost the same.
Right. It's all about those tiny little spelling differences.
Yeah, it's those little differences that really get me, like affect versus effect, or accept versus accept, or, oh, I know, advice versus advise. I swear these are like my personal nemesis. Even with the examples the script gives, I still find myself second guessing.
Yeah, I hear ya. But I think for apt and effect, there's actually a helpful trick to remember the difference. And it's this affect usually is a verb. It's like the action of influencing something.
Okay.
While effect is typically a noun, it's the result of that action.
Gotcha. So like the weather can affect my mood, but the effect is that I feel lazy on rainy days.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You got it. Now, how about accept and accept? Any mnemonics you use to keep those straight?
Honestly, not really. I usually just try to remember that accept means to receive something or agree to something.
Right.
But accept means to like exclude something.
Yeah, that's it. So think of that X at the beginning of accept.
Okay.
To me, that kind of emphasizes that idea of something being excluded, right?
Yeah, I like that. The X as in take it out.
Exactly. So if you're accepting something, you're including it. And if you're accepting something, well, you're leaving it out.
Ooh, I like that. That X really drives home the meaning. Okay, what about advice versus advise? Those two always feel like especially slippery to me.
Think of it this way. Advice, that's the noun, the thing itself. Advise is the verb, the act of, giving the advice. So you can give someone a piece of advice, or you can advise them on what to do. See the difference?
I think I'm starting to see the light here. It's all about the part of speech, right? Noun versus verb. Okay, I'm ready for more word pair wisdom.
Sure.
What's next on the list from our beginner's guide?
Well, the next section is called words that are easy to mix up. And the first pair we're tackling is farther and further.
Oh, yes, the infamous distance dilemma. I always get those two confused.
It's understandable they're very close in meaning. But traditionally, farther is used for physical distance, while further is used for metaphorical distance, or to indicate a greater extent of something. So you might travel farther down a road, but you explore a topic further in conversation.
Okay, that makes sense. But I have to admit, I've definitely seen further used for physical distance too. Is that becoming more acceptable these days?
You've hit on a really interesting point. Because while farther for physical distance is still preferred in, formal writing and all that, further is gaining acceptance for both physical and metaphorical distances in, like, everyday usage. It's actually a prime example of how language evolves.
So maybe the real trick isn't remembering a hard and fast rule, but like recognizing that the lines can be a bit blurry sometimes.
Exactly. That's the beauty of language. It's fluid, it's dynamic, and it's constantly adapting. What was once considered, like, totally incorrect can become perfectly acceptable over time.
That's a great reminder to, like, be open to those changes and not get too hung up on those rigid rules. Okay, what other easy to mix up words are lurking in this section?
Well, the next pair on the list might surprise you. Principle and principle.
Oh, those two. They're definitely tricky. I think I usually get them right, but I can never quite remember, like, the reason why one is right and the other one's wrong.
I hear ya. It's all about understanding their distinct roles. So principle can actually function as both a noun and an adjective.
Oh, okay.
As a noun, it refers to, someone in charge, like the principal of a school.
Right.
It can also refer to the most important element of something.
Okay.
As an adjective, it means main or primary.
Gotcha.
Principle, however, is always a noun, and it refers to a fundamental truth or law or belief.
Okay, so principle can be a person or a thing, and it often relates to something being, like, the most important.
Right.
And principle is an idea or belief.
Exactly.
Got it. Okay, so the principal of a school might uphold the principle of fairness.
Perfect example. You're really getting the hang of this. Ready to tackle some more word pairs?
Absolutely. Bring on the next batch.
Well, the next section is called Words That Have Different Meanings. And it starts with a pair that often trips people up. Emigrate and immigrate.
Ooh, those are good ones. I know they both have something to do with, moving between countries, but I can never remember which is which.
It all comes down to perspective. Emigrate means to leave one country to live permanently in another.
Okay.
Immigrate means to come to live permanently in a foreign country. So it's like two sides of the same coin, the same action, but from different points of view.
Okay. So if I'm focusing on someone leaving their country of origin, I use emigrate. But if I'm focusing on their arrival in a new country, I use immigrate.
Exactly. Like, imagine watching someone walk through a doorway, right?
Yeah.
They're exiting one room and they're entering another.
Right.
Same action, but the perspective determines which word we use.
Wow, that's a great way to visualize it. I think I finally have those two straightened out in my mind. What other perspective-based word pairs await us in this section?
Well, the next one is a classic, lie and lay.
Oh no, not those two. I swear those haunt my dreams.
I know. They can be tricky. But there's actually, like, a simple trick for remembering which is which. It all comes down to whether the verb takes a direct object or not. So lie means to recline or to rest. And it doesn't need a direct object. So, for example, I lie down for a nap.
So lie is what I do when I'm resting.
Precisely. But lay means to put something down. And it requires a direct object. So, for example, I lay the book on the table.
Okay.
The book is the direct object, receiving the action of laying.
Okay, I think I'm starting to see the difference. So if you're talking about, like, yourself resting, you use lie. But if you're talking about putting something down, you use lay.
Exactly. You're a natural at this.
Well, I have a great teacher. Okay, ready to move on to the next section?
Absolutely. Let's dive into the last category from our source material. This is common mistakes in everyday English. And the first pair on the list is a big one. Bring and take.
Oh, I know I mix those up all the time. Is there, like, an easy way to remember the difference?
There is. And it all comes down to direction. Bring implies movement towards the speaker or a specific location, whereas take implies movement away from the speaker or a specific location. So if you're asking someone to bring you something, you're asking them to move it closer to you. But if you're telling someone to take something, you're telling them to move it further away.
Okay, so if I'm at the office and I ask a coworker to bring me a stapler, I'm implying that I want them to bring the stapler to me at my desk.
Right.
But if I'm leaving the office and I tell that coworker to take their lunch break, I'm suggesting that they move away from their desk to enjoy their break.
Exactly. You've got it. It's all about the direction of movement,
Right.
Relative to the speaker or a specific location.
That makes so much sense. I'm feeling much more confident about using those words correctly now.
Yeah.
Okay, what's the final word pair on our list of common mistakes? I'm ready for the grand finale.
Okay, for our final word pair from this common mistake section, we're tackling one that's sure to resonate with anyone who's ever, felt the wrath of a grammar enthusiast. Less and fewer. You know, the one that always sparks debates in the comment section of every article online.
Oh, absolutely. It's one of those rules that seems like simple enough on the surface, but then you hear people using it incorrectly and you start to question like everything you thought you know about grammar.
I think part of the confusion, though, stems from the fact that both less and fewer deal with reducing quantities, right? But they apply to different types of things. And as our source material explains here, it all boils down to whether the noun that you're modifying is countable or uncountable.
So the classic example is less sugar versus fewer cookies, right? Because you can't count individual grains of sugar, so you use less. But you can count individual cookies, so you use fewer.
Precisely. It's all about whether you can, like, picture those individual units in your mind. If you can easily count them out one by one, like cookies or marbles or pencils, then you use fewer. But if it's like a bulk amount that doesn't lend itself to individual counting, like sugar or water or time, then you would use less.
Okay, that makes sense. So I would say I have less patience for traffic jams these days because patience isn't something you can count, but I have fewer errands to run this week because I can count those individual errands off my list.
Exactly. You're getting the hang of it. Now, what's interesting is that this rule, while technically correct, is starting to blur a bit in everyday conversation. So you might hear people say less people or less items, even though fewer would be, grammatically correct.
So is the language changing right before our eyes? Are we witnessing the evolution of grammar in real time?
It's certainly possible. Because language is a living thing, right?
Yeah.
And it's constantly adapting to the way that people use it. So what was once considered a strict rule can become more flexible over time, especially as usage patterns like shift and change. But even if the lines are blurring a bit, it's still helpful to understand the underlying principles of, countable versus uncountable nouns.
Yeah.
That way you can make a conscious choice about how you want to use these words. Whether you prefer to stick to the traditional rule or embrace the evolving language, it's up to you.
That's a great point. It's all about making informed choices as a speaker and a writer. But going through all these word pairs, it's making me realize just how nuanced the English language really is. There are so many subtle distinctions and potential pitfalls.
Absolutely. And I think that's what makes it such a fascinating language to explore, right? There's always something new to discover, some new layer of meaning to uncover. Even for native speakers, there are always opportunities to refine our understanding and our use of the language.
It's definitely a humbling experience. I came into this deep dive thinking it'd be a quick refresher on some basic grammar rules, but it's turned into so much more than that. It's made me appreciate the complexity and richness of English in a whole new way.
I'm glad to hear that. Because that's what we hope to achieve with these deep dives, to spark curiosity and encourage a deeper engagement with language, Because ultimately, language is about so much more than just getting the grammar right. It's about connecting with others, expressing ourselves clearly and effectively, and appreciating the beauty and power of words.
Well said. We've covered a lot of ground today, from homophones to commonly misused words to the evolving nature of grammar itself. It's been a real whirlwind tour of the English language.
It has indeed.
Yeah.
But we're not quite finished yet. We still have a few more word pairs to unpack from our source material, ready to continue our linguistic adventure.
Absolutely. What other word-related wisdom awaits us?
Well, the next section is called Words That Have Opposite Meanings, and it starts with a pair that often causes confusion. Flammable and inflammable.
Like those two mean opposite things? I thought they were synonyms.
That's a common misconception. And it's understandable given the presence of that in prefix, which usually means not. But in this case, both flammable and inflammable actually mean capable of easily catching fire.
Whoa. That's really counterintuitive. So why are there two words that mean the same thing?
So the word inflammable actually came first, believe it or not. And it comes from the Latin word inflammare, meaning to set on fire. However, because of that potentially confusing in prefix, people started using flammable as a clearer alternative to avoid accidents,
So it was a safety measure. People were worried that others might mistake inflammable for not flammable and end up in a dangerous situation.
Exactly. Imagine seeing a sign that says inflammable liquid, assuming it's safe to handle. Yikes.
Oh, good.
So the word flammable was introduced to remove any ambiguity and make that warning crystal clear.
That makes so much sense. It's a great example of how language evolves, not just for clarity, but for safety as well.
Absolutely. And it highlights the importance of being aware of these potentially confusing word pairs. especially when it comes to situations where safety is paramount.
So should we just avoid using inflammable altogether then?
It's generally recommended to stick with flammable because it's more widely understood and less likely to cause confusion.
Okay.
However, inflammable is still considered like a valid word, and you might encounter it in older texts or, technical contexts.
Okay, good to know. So the takeaway is to just be aware of the potential for confusion and use the word that's most likely to be understood clearly by your audience.
Exactly. Communication is all about clarity and effectiveness. Now, ready for another word, pair with opposite meanings. This one might surprise you, imply and infer.
Oh, those are tricky. I know they both have something to do with indirect communication, but I often mix them up.
It's a common confusion. The key difference, though, lies in who's doing the suggesting and who's drawing the conclusion. So to imply means to suggest something indirectly without stating it explicitly.
Yeah.
To infer means to draw a conclusion based on something that has been, implied or suggested.
So the speaker or writer implies something, and the listener or reader infers something.
You got it. It's a two-way street of communication. The speaker sends out a subtle message. And the listener interprets that message and draws a conclusion based on, the available information.
Okay. So, for example, if I say, wow, it's getting late, I might be implying that it's time for my guests to leave. And if my guests pick up on that subtle cue and start gathering their things, they are inferring my meaning.
Perfect example. You've illustrated the difference beautifully. It's all about that, subtle dance between what is said and what is understood.
I think I'm finally starting to grasp the distinction. It's all about the direction of the communication, who's sending the message and who's receiving it.
Exactly. You're really getting the hang of these tricky word pairs. Ready for one more before we wrap up this section?
Absolutely. Bring it on.
Okay. The last pair in this category is illicit and illicit. These two are often confused because they sound very similar, but their meanings are quite different.
Oh, I know I've mixed those up before. It's that pesky I versus E difference again.
It's easy to see why they cause confusion, but there's a helpful trick for remembering which is which. Illicit, with an E, means to draw out or evoke a response, usually a positive one. It often applies to, getting information or a reaction from someone.
Okay.
Illicit, with an I, means illegal or forbidden.
So a detective might try to elicit a confession from a suspect, while a smuggler might engage in illicit activities to bring goods across the border.
Perfect examples. You've captured the distinction perfectly. It's all about the nature of the action, whether it's, legitimate or unlawful, positive or negative.
This has been such an enlightening deep dive. I feel like I'm starting to see the English language in a whole new light. It's amazing how many subtle nuances there are, even in words that seem, simple at first glance.
That's the beauty of language, isn't it? There's always more to discover, more layers of meaning to uncover. And the more we explore those nuances, the more confident and effective we become as communicators.
I couldn't agree more. Now, what other linguistic adventures await us in our source material?
Well, the next section is called Words That Are Often Mispronounced, and it starts with a pair that might make you cringe just thinking about it. Nuclear and nuclear.
Oh, no, not that one. Ugh. It's like nails on a chalkboard every time I hear someone say nuclear.
I understand the feeling. It's one of those mispronunciations that really gets under people's skin. But let's dive into the reason why it's so commonly mispronounced, shall we?
Okay, I'm ready for a pronunciation lesson. Hit me with your linguistic wisdom.
Well, the correct pronunciation of nuclear actually involves 3 distinct syllables,
Okay.
Nuclear. The emphasis is on that first syllable.
Right.
And that middle syllable is a clear clee sound, not, distorted cull sound.
So it's all about emphasizing those syllables and getting that clee sound right in the middle. But why do you think people struggle so much with this word in particular?
I think it's a combination of factors, honestly.
Yeah.
First, that clear sound in the middle syllable can be a bit tricky for, some speakers to articulate.
Yeah.
And then second, there's the influence of similar sounding words like molecular and particular, which do have that cull sound in the middle.
Right.
And then third, there's the fact that the mispronunciation nuclear has become so widespread, it's almost gained a life of its own.
Yeah.
You hear it everywhere, from casual conversations to news broadcasts. And that repeated exposure can just reinforce the incorrect pronunciation, even if you know better.
That's a great point. It's our brains get programmed to hear what's familiar, even if it's not technically Correct. So what's the best way to break free from that nuclear habit and embrace the correct pronunciation?
Practice, practice, practice. The more you consciously say nuclei out loud, the more natural it will become, right? So pay attention to like the way you shape your mouth and your tongue when you say the word. And if you catch yourself, slipping back into the nuclear habit, just gently correct yourself and move on. Over time, that conscious effort will help you like retrain your brain and master the correct pronunciation.
I'm ready to embrace the challenge. No more nuclear for me. Now, what other mispronounced words are lurking in this section?
Well, the next one is a word that often trips people up because of its silent letters. Espresso.
Ah, yes. The beloved coffee beverage. I have a feeling I know where this is going. People often add an extra X sound in there, don't they?
Exactly. The correct pronunciation of espresso is espresso, with the emphasis on the second syllable and no X sound anywhere.
Right.
But that X seems to like sneak in there because people see the double S and they automatically want to make an X sound.
Oh, yeah, I can see that.
But remember, those S sounds are separate and distinct.
So it's espresso, not espresso. Got it. Any tips for avoiding that extra X sound?
I would say, like, think of the word express without the X. That might help you visualize the correct pronunciation and train your tongue to avoid that unnecessary X sound.
That's a great tip. I'll definitely be keeping that in mind next time I'm ordering my favorite coffee drink.
Yeah.
Now, what's the final word on our list of mispronounced words?
This one is a word that's often mispronounced because of its tricky combination of vowels. Prerogative.
Ah, yes, prerogative. I've definitely heard people stumble over that one. What's the most common mistake people make?
The most common mistake is switching the E and the A sounds in the second and third syllables. The correct pronunciation is prerogative, with the emphasis on the first syllable. So it's easy to see why people might get the vowels mixed up, especially when, speaking quickly. But paying attention to that syllable breakdown can help you avoid the mispronunciation.
So it's prerogative, not prerogative. I'll definitely be practicing that one in the mirror. Now, we've explored a lot of confusing and commonly misused words today. But before we wrap up this deep dive, I want to take a moment to reflect on what we've learned. So what are some of the key takeaways for our listeners today?
Well, I think the most important takeaway is that language is a complex and ever-evolving system. There are, rules and conventions, of course.
Right.
But there's also a lot of flexibility and room for interpretation.
Absolutely. And I think it's important to approach language with a sense of curiosity and humility. There's always something new to learn, some new nuance to discover.
Exactly. And even when we make mistakes, those mistakes can actually be valuable learning opportunities. They help us refine our understanding and become, more effective communicators.
So the key is to embrace those mistakes, learn from them, and just keep striving to improve our command of the language.
Precisely. It's all about that lifelong journey of learning and discovery. And as we see today, even seemingly simple words can hold, hidden depths and unexpected challenges.
This deep dive has been a real eye-opener for me. I'm leaving with a renewed appreciation for the intricacies of the English language and a determination to keep honing my skills.
That's fantastic to hear. And remember, language is ultimately about, connection and communication. So go out there, embrace the complexities, and have fun exploring the wonderful world of words.
Well said. And to all our listeners out there, thank you for joining us on this linguistic adventure. We hope you've enjoyed this deep dive into the world of confusing English words.
Until next time, keep learning, keep exploring, and keep playing with language.